The train screeched to a halt, its metallic cry echoing through the desolate station. Dust motes danced in the weak sunlight filtering through the grimy windows, illuminating a scene of decay and abandonment. Silas stepped onto the cracked platform, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and forgotten memories. Blackwood. A name that tasted like ash in his mouth. He hadn't been back in 15 years, not since he'd run. He pulled his coat tighter around him, a futile attempt to ward off the chill that seeped deeper than the autumn air. Blackwood had always been a place of shadows, but now, returning felt like stepping into a mausoleum. The town was smaller than he remembered, the buildings hunched and weary, their paint peeling like sunburnt skin. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the mournful whistle of the wind snaking through the deserted streets. As he walked, the feeling of being watched prickled at the back of his neck. He glanced around, but saw nothing. Just the empty storefronts, the boarded-up windows, and the ominous silhouette of the Blackwood Manor looming in the distance, a skeletal finger pointing accusingly at the sky. He quickened his pace, his boots echoing on the cracked pavement. He told himself it was just nerves, the weight of his past pressing down on him. But then he heard it. A metallic clink, a rhythmic tapping that grew steadily louder. He stopped, his heart pounding in his chest. And then he saw it. Perched atop a rusted lamppost, its eyes gleaming like chicks of obsidian, was a raven. But not just any raven. This one was made of metal, its feathers crafted from intricate plates of iron, its beak a sharp, gleaming point. The wind rustled through its metallic plumage, creating a chilling, discordant melody. Silas stared, transfixed. He'd never seen anything like it. A macabre work of art, or something far more sinister? As he watched, the raven tilted its head, its metallic eyes locking onto his. He felt a shiver crawl down his spine, a primal fear that resonated deep within his bones. He started walking again, faster this time, trying to ignore the creature. But the clinking followed, a constant, unsettling reminder of its presence. He glanced back. The raven was still there, perched on another lamppost, its eyes fixed on him, unblinking. It was following him. He reached the outskirts of town, the familiar sight of his childhood home coming into view. A small, dilapidated cottage, its windows dark and empty. He hesitated, a wave of conflicting emotions washing over him. Relief at reaching his destination and a deep, unsettling dread. He pushed open the creaking gate and walked up the overgrown path. As he reached the front door, he heard the clinking again, closer this time. He looked up. The iron raven was perched on the porch railing, its metallic eyes gleaming in the fading light. He fumbled with the key, his hands shaking. Finally, he managed to unlock the door and stumbled inside, slamming it shut behind him. He leaned against the door, gasping for breath, the image of the iron raven burned into his mind. The house was just as he remembered it. Dusty, silent, and filled with the ghosts of his past. He walked through the familiar rooms, each one a painful reminder of what he had lost. His parents, gone. Swallowed by the darkness that clung to Blackwood like a shroud. He reached the living room, the air thick with the scent of mildew and decay. He sank into the worn armchair, exhaustion washing over him. He closed his eyes, trying to block out the memories, the fear, the unsettling presence of the iron raven. He didn't know how long he sat there, lost in his thoughts. But then he heard it again, a soft tapping at the window. He opened his eyes, his heart pounding in his chest. The iron raven was there, perched on the windowsill, its metallic beak tapping insistently against the glass. Its eyes, cold and unblinking, seemed to bore into his soul. He stared at the creature, a growing sense of dread washing over him. This wasn't just some random occurrence. This was something more. Something deliberate. Why was it following him? What did it want? He stood up, his legs trembling. He had to find out. He had to understand what was happening. He walked towards the window, his hand reaching out to touch the cold, metallic surface of the glass. As his fingers brushed against the pane, the raven tilted its head, and a single word, a word that echoed through the silent house, a word that chilled him to the bone, escaped its metallic beak. Return. The word hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Return. Silas recoiled, stumbling back from the window as if burned. The raven remained, an unmoving sentinel, its obsidian eyes reflecting his terror. Return? Return to what? To the memories he had desperately tried to bury? To the darkness that had consumed his family? He backed away further, his gaze fixed on the iron bird. He felt a cold sweat prickling his skin, his breath catching in his throat. He had to get out. He had to escape this suffocating atmosphere, this creeping dread. He turned and fled, stumbling through the familiar rooms, desperate to escape the confines of the house. He burst out the front door, gasping for air, the image of the raven seared into his mind. He ran, not knowing where he was going, driven only by the primal urge to escape. He ran through the deserted streets of Blackwood, the wind whipping around him, carrying the whispers of forgotten tragedies. The town seemed to leer at him, the boarded-up windows like vacant eyes, the crumbling buildings like skeletal remains. He could almost feel the weight of the past pressing down on him, suffocating him, dragging him back into the darkness. He ran until his lungs burned and his legs ached, until he could run no more. He collapsed against the crumbling stone wall, his chest heaving, his body trembling. He looked back, his heart pounding in his chest. The raven was there, perched atop the Blackwood Manor, its silhouette stark against the darkening sky. It hadn't moved. It hadn't chased him. It had simply waited, watching. Silas stared at the manor, a shiver running down his spine. The Blackwood Manor, the source of all his nightmares. A place of whispered legends and unspeakable horrors. A place he had vowed never to return to. But the raven's word echoed in his mind. Return. He knew, with a chilling certainty, that he had no choice. He had to confront his past. He had to face the darkness that haunted Blackwood. He had to understand the raven's purpose. He pushed himself to his feet, his legs heavy and leaden. He started walking towards the Blackwood Manor, his heart filled with a mixture of fear and grim determination. The closer he got, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The air grew thick and heavy, the silence deeper and more profound. He could feel the weight of the manor's history pressing down on him, the echoes of past tragedies resonating in his bones. He reached the gates of the manor, two rusted iron structures adorned with grotesque gargoyles. He hesitated, his hand trembling as he reached out to push them open. He could feel the eyes of the gargoyles watching him, judging him, their silent gazes filled with ancient malice. He pushed the gates open, the rusted hinges groaning in protest, the sound echoing through the silent grounds. He walked up the long, overgrown driveway, the gravel crunching beneath his feet. The manor loomed before him, a Gothic monstrosity of crumbling stone and decaying wood. Its windows were dark and empty, like vacant sockets staring out into the night. He reached the front door, a massive oak structure adorned with intricate carvings of grotesque creatures. He reached out and grasped the iron knocker, shaped like a snarling wolf's head. He hesitated, his hand trembling. He knew that once he knocked, there would be no turning back. He was about to awaken something ancient and terrible. He took a deep breath and knocked. The sound echoed through the silent manor, a deafening reverberation that seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. He waited, his heart pounding in his chest. The silence returned, deeper and more oppressive than before. He was about to knock again when he heard it. A shuffling sound from within the manor. A slow, deliberate dragging of feet across the floor. The door creaked open, revealing a figure shrouded in darkness. A tall, gaunt figure, its face obscured by shadows. The air grew cold, a chilling draft emanating from within the manor. "Who's there?" A raspy voice croaked, the sound like nails scraping against the chalkboard. Silas swallowed, his throat dry. "My name is Silas. I used to live here." The figure remained silent for a moment, its eyes, two pinpricks of light in the darkness, fixed on Silas. Then it spoke again, its voice even more chilling than before. "Silas. Yes, I remember you. The boy who ran away." The figure stepped forward, revealing itself in the dim light. It was an old woman, her face wrinkled and gaunt, her eyes filled with an ancient wisdom and a terrible sadness. She was dressed in a long, black gown, her hands gnarled and bony. "Come in, Silas," she said, her voice a mere whisper. "I've been expecting you." Silas hesitated, a sense of foreboding washing over him. He knew he should turn and run, escape while he still could. But he also knew that he couldn't. He had come too far. He had to know the truth. He stepped across the threshold, entering the Blackwood Manor. The door creaked shut behind him, plunging him into darkness. "Welcome home, Silas," the old woman said, her voice echoing through the silent manor. "Welcome home to your destiny." She led him through the dark and decaying halls of the manor, the air thick with the scent of mildew and decay. The walls were lined with portraits of stern-faced men and women, their eyes seeming to follow him as he walked. He could feel their disapproval, their judgment, their silent condemnation. They reached a large, imposing room, the walls lined with bookshelves filled with ancient tomes. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows across the room. "Sit down, Silas," the old woman said, gesturing to a worn armchair. "We have much to discuss." Silas sat down, his gaze fixed on the old woman. He could feel the weight of her gaze, the weight of the manor's history, the weight of the curse that hung over Blackwood. "You've seen the raven, haven't you?" the old woman asked, her voice a mere whisper. Silas nodded, his throat too tight to speak. "It has returned," the old woman said, her eyes filled with a terrible sadness. "And with it the curse." "What curse?" Silas managed to croak out. The old woman sighed, her gaze drifting towards the fire. "The curse of the Iron Raven," she said. "A curse that has plagued Blackwood for centuries." She began to tell him the story of the curse, a tale of ancient evils and unspeakable horrors. A tale of betrayal, revenge, and a pact made with a dark entity. A tale that would change his life forever. As she spoke, Silas felt a growing sense of dread washing over him. He realized that he had stumbled into something far bigger and far more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. He was trapped. Trapped in the Blackwood Manor, trapped in the curse of the Iron Raven, trapped in his own destiny. "The raven is not just a messenger," the old woman said, her voice growing increasingly faint. "It is a key to unlocking something terrible." She paused, her eyes locking onto Silas's. "And you, Silas, you are the one who must unlock it." Silas stared at the old woman, his mind reeling. He didn't understand. What did she mean? What was he supposed to unlock? Before he could ask, the old woman slumped forward in her chair, her eyes closing, her body still. Silas rushed to her side, shaking her gently. Old woman, wake up." But she didn't respond. She was gone. Silas stood up, his heart pounding in his chest. He was alone. Alone in the Blackwood Manor, alone with the curse of the Iron Raven. He looked around the room, his gaze falling on a large, ornate chest in the corner. He felt an irresistible urge to open it, to see what was inside. He walked towards the chest, his hand trembling as he reached out to lift the lid. As he lifted the lid, a cloud of dust billowed out, filling the air. He coughed, waving his hand in front of his face. When the dust settled, he saw it. Lying inside the chest, bathed in the flickering light of the fire, was a book. An ancient, leather-bound book, its pages yellowed and brittle. He reached out and picked up the book, his fingers tracing the faded symbols on its cover. He felt a strange energy emanating from it, a dark and powerful force that seemed to seep into his very being. He opened the book, his eyes scanning the ancient script. He couldn't understand the words, but he could feel their power, their malevolence. As he turned the pages, he came across a drawing of a raven. But not just any raven. This raven was made of metal, its feathers crafted from intricate plates of iron, its beak a sharp, gleaming point. It was the Iron Raven. He stared at the drawing, his heart pounding in his chest. He suddenly understood. The book, the chest, the old woman. It was all connected. The book contained the secrets of the curse of the Iron Raven. And he, Silas, was the one who was destined to unlock them. He turned another page, and a small piece of parchment fell out, drifting to the floor. He bent down and picked it up, unfolding it carefully. On it, a single word was written in elegant script: "Awaken." The parchment felt strangely warm to the touch. "Awaken." Silas whispered the word, its meaning unclear, yet heavy with implication. Awaken what? Some dormant evil? Some forgotten power? The possibilities were terrifying. He looked back at the book, its pages filled with indecipherable symbols and cryptic illustrations. It felt ancient, imbued with a power that resonated deep within his bones, a power that both fascinated and repelled him. He knew he had to decipher it, to understand the secrets it held. But he also knew that doing so could unleash something terrible upon Blackwood, something far worse than anything he could imagine. He carried the book to the table near the fireplace, the flames casting dancing shadows on its leather cover. He sat down, his heart pounding in his chest, and began to carefully examine the pages. The script was unlike anything he had ever seen, a strange combination of runes and symbols that seemed to writhe and shift before his eyes. He spent hours poring over the book, his brow furrowed in concentration. He tried to make sense of the symbols, to find some kind of pattern, some kind of clue that could lead him to the truth. But the more he studied, the more confused he became. The book seemed to resist his efforts, as if it were actively trying to conceal its secrets. As the night wore on, a strange feeling began to creep over him. A feeling of being watched, of being surrounded by something unseen. He glanced around the room, but saw nothing. Just the flickering flames in the fireplace, the shadows dancing on the walls, and the portraits of the stern-faced men and women staring down at him. He tried to dismiss the feeling as mere paranoia, the result of exhaustion and fear. But it persisted, growing stronger with each passing moment. He could almost feel the presence of something ancient and malevolent lurking in the shadows, watching him, waiting for him to make a mistake. Suddenly, a gust of wind rattled the windows, causing the flames in the fireplace to flicker wildly. The room plunged into near darkness, the shadows deepening and swirling around him. He gasped, his heart leaping into his throat. Then he heard it, a soft tapping at the window. He froze, his blood running cold. He knew what it was. He slowly turned his head towards the window, his eyes widening in terror. The iron raven was there, perched on the windowsill, its metallic beak tapping insistently against the glass. Its eyes, cold and unblinking, seemed to bore into his soul. He stared at the creature, paralyzed with fear. It was as if the raven were summoning him, urging him to continue his search. He knew he couldn't ignore it. He had to face his fears, to confront the darkness that haunted Blackwood. He stood up, his legs trembling, and walked towards the window. As he approached, the raven tilted its head, and a single feather, a metallic feather crafted from intricate plates of iron, fell from its wing, drifting silently to the floor. Silas picked up the feather, its surface cold and smoothed against his skin. He examined it closely, noticing intricate carvings etched into its surface. He recognized the symbols. They were the same symbols that were in the book. He looked back at the raven, his mind racing. The feather was a clue, a key to unlocking the secrets of the book. He had to decipher the symbols on the feather. He returned to the table and carefully placed the feather next to the book. He took a magnifying glass from a nearby shelf and began to examine the carvings on the feather. The symbols were tiny and intricate, almost invisible to the naked eye. He spent hours studying the feather, comparing the symbols to those in the book. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, he found a match. One of the symbols on the feather corresponded to a particular passage in the book. He turned to the passage and began to read, his voice trembling with anticipation. The passage was written in the ancient script, but somehow, with the help of the feather, he was able to decipher it. The passage spoke of a ritual, a dark and forbidden ritual that could awaken a powerful entity. An entity that had been dormant for centuries, slumbering beneath the Blackwood Manor. Silas's blood ran cold. He realized that the curse of the Iron Raven was not just a legend, but a terrifying reality. The raven was not just a messenger, but a key to unlocking something unspeakable. He looked back at the feather, his hand trembling. He knew that he had to stop the ritual, to prevent the entity from being awakened. But how? He was just one man, alone in a haunted manor, facing an ancient curse. Suddenly, he heard a noise from downstairs. A creaking sound, as if someone were walking through the house. He froze, his heart pounding in his chest. He was not alone. He grabbed a heavy candlestick from the table and held it aloft, his hand shaking. He slowly crept towards the door, his ears straining to hear any sound. The creaking continued, growing louder with each passing moment. It was coming from the hallway below. Someone was definitely in the house. He reached the top of the stairs and peered down into the darkness. He could see nothing, just the shadows dancing on the walls. He took a deep breath and started to descend the stairs, his footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. As he reached the bottom, he heard a voice. A raspy, chilling voice that seemed to echo through the silent house. "Looking for something, Silas?" Silas whirled around, his heart leaping into his throat. Standing in the shadows was a figure. A tall, gaunt figure, its face obscured by darkness. "Who are you?" Silas demanded, his voice trembling. The figure stepped forward, revealing itself in the dim light. It was a man. A man with pale skin, sunken eyes, and a cruel, twisted smile. He was dressed in a long, black coat, and his hands were covered in blood. "My name is not important," the man said, his voice a mere whisper. "What is important is that you have something that I want." He gestured towards the book in Silas's hand. "The book. Give it to me." Silas clutched the book tighter, his mind racing. Who was this man? And why did he want the book? "I don't know what you're talking about," Silas said, trying to sound confident. The man chuckled, a chilling sound that sent shivers down Silas's spine. "Don't play coy with me, Silas. I know you've been reading the book. I know you know about the ritual." He stepped closer, his eyes burning with a dark intensity. "Give me the book, and I might let you live." Silas knew he couldn't give him the book. Not if he wanted to save Blackwood. He had to protect it, no matter the cost. "I'm not giving you anything," Silas said, his voice firm. The man's smile vanished, replaced by a look of pure hatred. "Then you have chosen your fate." He lunged at Silas, his hand outstretched, his fingers reaching for the book. Silas dodged to the side, narrowly avoiding the man's grasp. He raised the candlestick and swung it at the man's head. The candlestick connected with a sickening thud, sending the man staggering backwards. He clutched his head, groaning in pain. Silas didn't hesitate. He turned and fled, running through the dark and decaying halls of the manor. He knew he had to escape, to get away from this man. He ran until he reached the front door, his lungs burning, his legs aching. He fumbled with the lock, his hands shaking. Finally, he managed to unlock the door and burst outside, gasping for air. He ran across the overgrown grounds, towards the gates of the manor. He could hear the man chasing him, his footsteps echoing through the silent night. He knew he couldn't outrun him. He had to find a place to hide. He reached the gates and pushed them open, running out onto the deserted road. He looked around, desperately searching for a place to conceal himself. Then he saw it. The old church, its silhouette stark against the moonlit sky. He knew it was his only chance. He ran towards the church, his heart pounding in his chest. He reached the front door and pushed it open, stumbling inside. The church was dark and silent, the air thick with the scent of incense and dust. He looked around, searching for a place to hide. He saw a confessional booth in the corner. He rushed towards it and slipped inside, closing the door behind him. He sat in the darkness, his breath held, listening for any sound. He could hear the man approaching, his footsteps growing louder with each passing moment. The man entered the church, his voice echoing through the silent space. "Silas, I know you're here. You can't hide from me." Silas closed his eyes, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew it was only a matter of time before the man found him. Suddenly, he heard a voice. A soft, ethereal voice that seemed to come from within the confessional booth itself. "Help me." Silas's eyes snapped open. He looked around, but saw nothing. The voice was gone. He dismissed it as his imagination, the product of fear and exhaustion. But then he heard it again. "Help me. Please." The voice was clearer this time, more insistent. It was definitely coming from within the confessional booth. Silas hesitated, his mind racing. What was going on? Was he hallucinating? Or was something else at play? He reached out and touched the wall of the confessional booth, his fingers tracing the smooth, wooden surface. He felt a strange energy emanating from the wall, a cold and powerful force that seemed to seep into his very being. Then he saw it. A small inscription carved into the wood. An inscription that sent a shiver down his spine. The inscription read, "Beware the guardian of the gate. Beware the guardian of the gate." Silas traced the inscription with a trembling finger, the words resonating with a chilling significance. Guardian of what gate? And who or what was this guardian? The ethereal voice, the inscription, it was all pointing towards something hidden within the church, something connected to the curse. He pressed his ear against the wooden partition separating his booth from the adjacent one. Silence. Utter, unnerving silence. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was not alone, that something was listening, watching, waiting. Outside, the man's voice echoed through the church, closer now. "Silas! Come out, wherever you are. I know you can hear me." Silas's heart hammered against his ribs. He had to make a decision, and fast. Stay hidden and risk being discovered, or venture into the unknown and confront whatever lurked within the church. He took a deep breath, steeling his resolve. He couldn't cower in fear. He had to be proactive, to fight back against the darkness that was consuming Blackwood. He carefully pushed open the door of the confessional booth, the hinges creaking softly in protest. He peered out into the darkness of the church, his eyes straining to adjust to the dim light. The church was even more imposing than he remembered. The vaulted ceiling soared high above, lost in shadow. Stained glass windows, depicting scenes from the Bible, cast eerie, multicolored patterns on the stone floor. The air was thick with the scent of incense and dust, a musty aroma that spoke of centuries of neglect. He stepped out of the confessional booth, his senses on high alert. He scanned the church, searching for any sign of the man, any hint of the guardian of the gate. He noticed a small door hidden behind the altar, almost completely obscured by a heavy velvet curtain. He had never seen it before. Could this be the gate the inscription spoke of? He crept towards the altar, his footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. As he approached, he heard the man's voice again, closer now. "I'm coming for you, Silas. There's nowhere left to run." Silas reached the altar and pulled back the velvet curtain, revealing the small door. It was made of dark, weathered wood, reinforced with iron bands. A heavy iron lock secured the door, its surface rusted and pitted. He tried the handle, but it wouldn't budge. The door was locked tight. He needed to find a way to open it, and fast. He remembered the candlestick he had grabbed earlier. He pulled it from his pocket and examined it closely. It was made of solid brass, heavy and sturdy. It might be enough to break the lock. He positioned the candlestick against the lock and took a deep breath. He swung the candlestick with all his might, slamming it against the rusted metal. The lock held. He tried again and again, each blow sending vibrations through his arm. The lock began to weaken, the metal groaning under the strain. On the third blow, the lock finally gave way, snapping open with a loud crack. Silas pulled open the door, revealing a narrow, winding staircase that descended into darkness. He hesitated, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew that going down those stairs was a risk, that he might be walking into a trap. But he also knew that he had no choice. He had to confront whatever lurked below. He grabbed the candlestick and started down the stairs, his footsteps echoing through the silent passage. The air grew colder and damper with each step, the scent of mildew and decay growing stronger. The staircase descended for what seemed like an eternity. winding deeper and deeper into the earth. Finally, he reached the bottom, emerging into a small, circular chamber. The chamber was lit by a single flickering torch, its flame casting dancing shadows on the stone walls. The walls were lined with shelves, filled with ancient artifacts and forgotten relics. Skulls, bones, and other macabre objects were scattered throughout the chamber, creating an atmosphere of dread and despair. In the center of the chamber stood a stone altar, stained with what appeared to be dried blood. Above the altar, hanging from the ceiling, was a cage. A large iron cage, its bars twisted and warped. And inside the cage was the iron raven. Silas stared at the raven, his blood running cold. It was even more menacing up close, its metallic feathers gleaming in the torchlight, its obsidian eyes burning with a malevolent intensity. He took a step towards the cage, drawn to it by an irresistible force. As he approached, the raven tilted its head, and a single word, a word that echoed through the chamber, a word that chilled him to the bone, escaped its metallic beak. Free. He stopped, his hand trembling. Free? What did it want to be freed from? And what would happen if he released it? Suddenly, he heard a noise behind him. He whirled around, his heart leaping into his throat. The man was standing at the entrance to the chamber, a cruel smile twisting his lips. "So, you found my little pet," he said, his voice a mere whisper. Silas clutched the candlestick tighter, his mind racing. He was trapped in the chamber with the man and the iron raven. "Who are you?" Silas demanded, his voice trembling. "What do you want?" The man chuckled, a chilling sound that sent shivers down Silas's spine. "My name is not important. What is important is that I am the one who will awaken the entity. And you, Silas, are going to help me." He stepped closer, his eyes burning with a dark intensity. "I need the book, Silas. Give it to me, and I promise to make your death quick." Silas shook his head, his mind made up. He would never give him the book. He would fight to the death to protect it. "I'm not giving you anything," Silas said, his voice firm. The man's smile vanished, replaced by a look of pure hatred. "Then you will die." He lunged at Silas, his hand outstretched, his fingers reaching for the book. Silas dodged to the side, narrowly avoiding the man's grasp. He raised the candlestick and swung it at the man's head. The man blocked the blow with his arm, the candlestick glancing off his skin. He grabbed Silas by the throat, squeezing tightly. Silas gasped for air, his vision blurring. He struggled to break free, but the man's grip was too strong. He felt his strength fading, his consciousness slipping away. He knew he was about to die. Suddenly, he heard a voice. A soft, ethereal voice that seemed to come from within the cage. "Release me." Silas looked towards the cage, his eyes widening in terror. The iron raven was staring at him, its obsidian eyes burning with an unholy light. "Release me, and I will help you," the raven said, its voice growing stronger with each passing moment. Silas hesitated, his mind racing. Could he trust the raven? Or was it simply trying to trick him? He looked back at the man, his face contorted in a cruel grin. He knew he had no choice. He had to take the risk. With a final surge of strength, he kicked the man in the groin, sending him staggering backwards. He broke free from the man's grasp and stumbled towards the cage. He reached out and grabbed the iron bars, his fingers trembling. He looked back at the raven, his eyes questioning. The raven nodded, its metallic beak opening slightly. Silas closed his eyes and pulled on the bars with all his might. The cage creaked and groaned, the rusted metal protesting under the strain. He pulled again and again, until finally, the bars snapped open, releasing the iron raven from its prison. The raven spread its metallic wings and soared into the air, its shadow falling over the chamber. It circled once, then swooped down towards the man, its metallic beak aimed straight for his throat. The man screamed, his eyes widening in terror. The raven struck, its beak piercing his flesh. The man fell to the ground, his body convulsing. Silas watched in horror as the raven continued to attack the man, tearing at his flesh with its metallic beak. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. The raven was a monster, a creature of pure evil. Finally, the man stopped moving. The raven landed on his chest, its obsidian eyes fixed on Silas. "You have freed me," the raven said, its voice a mere whisper. "Now, I will fulfill my end of the bargain." The raven spread its wings and flew towards Silas, its shadow engulfing him. He braced himself for the attack, his heart pounding in his chest. But the raven didn't attack. It simply landed on his shoulder, its metallic claws digging into his flesh. "I am now bound to you, Silas," the raven said, its voice a cold whisper in his ear. "You are my master, and I am your servant." Silas stared at the raven, his mind reeling. He didn't understand. What was happening? "What do you mean?" Silas asked, his voice trembling. The raven tilted its head, its obsidian eyes gleaming in the torchlight. "I mean that you are now the guardian of the gate," it said, "and I am here to help you protect it." Suddenly, the ground began to shake. The walls of the chamber began to crumble. The torch flickered and died, plunging the chamber into darkness. "The entity is awakening," the raven said, its voice filled with urgency. "We must leave now, or we will be consumed." Silas didn't hesitate. He turned and fled, following the raven through the crumbling chamber. They raced up the stairs, the ground shaking violently beneath their feet. They reached the top of the stairs and burst out into the church, just as the roof began to collapse. They ran out of the church, dodging falling debris. They reached the safety of the road and turned to look back at the church. The building was collapsing in on itself, consumed by a dark and swirling vortex of energy. Silas stared in horror as the church disappeared, swallowed by the darkness. The entity had awakened, and he, Silas, was now the guardian of the gate. But what was he guarding it from? And what was he supposed to do now? As the dust settled, the raven spoke, its voice a chilling whisper in his ear. "There is much you do not know, Guardian," it said. "The entity is not the true threat. It is merely a pawn. There is something far worse, something far more ancient, that lies beyond the gate. And it is coming." The words hung in the cold night air, heavy with dread. Something far worse. Silas stared at the swirling vortex where the church once stood. The image burned into his mind. He felt the weight of the raven on his shoulder, its claws a constant, unnerving reminder of their bond. He was a guardian now, but a guardian of what? And against whom? "What is it?" Silas asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "What's beyond the entity?" The raven remained silent for a moment, its obsidian eyes fixed on the swirling darkness. Then it spoke, its voice a chilling whisper in his ear. "The entity was a prison, a cage for something far older, far more powerful. Something that slumbers beneath Blackwood." "Slumbers?" Silas asked, his heart pounding in his chest. "What is it? A god? A demon?" "Something older," the raven replied, its voice a low growl. "Before gods, before demons, there was something else. A primal force, a being of pure chaos and destruction. It was sealed away long ago, by those who understood the true nature of Blackwood. The entity was meant to keep it contained, but now..." The raven trailed off, its gaze fixed on the darkness. "Now, the seal is broken. The entity is gone, and the slumbering one is beginning to stir." Silas felt a surge of panic. He was just one man, armed with nothing but a book and a metallic raven. How could he possibly stand against the primal force, a being of pure chaos? "What do we do?" Silas asked, his voice trembling. "How do we stop it?" The raven tilted its head, its obsidian eyes gleaming in the moonlight. "We follow the ley lines," it said. "They are the pathways of power, the veins of the earth. They lead to the heart of the slumbering one." "Ley lines?" Silas asked, confused. "What are you talking about?" "The ancient ones knew," the raven replied. "They built Blackwood upon a nexus of ley lines, channeling the earth's energy to maintain the seal. We must follow these lines to the place where the slumbering one lies, and find a way to re-establish the seal." "But how?" Silas asked, desperate for answers. How do we follow these ley lines? The book, the raven replied. It contains the knowledge of the ancient ones. It holds the key to understanding the ley lines and the rituals needed to re-establish the seal. Silas looked down at the book in his hand, its leather cover worn and faded. He had only just begun to decipher its secrets, and now he was being tasked with saving the world. Okay, Silas said, his voice filled with a newfound determination. Let's do it. Let's find these ley lines and stop whatever's coming. The raven spread its wings and soared into the air, circling above Silas. Follow me, Guardian, it said. The path is long and dangerous, but we have no choice. Blackwood's fate, and perhaps the fate of the world, rests upon our shoulders. Silas took a deep breath and started walking, following the raven as it flew towards the darkness. He felt a sense of foreboding wash over him, a premonition of the horrors that lay ahead. But he also felt a surge of adrenaline, a determination to fight back against the darkness, to protect the town he had once abandoned. They walked for hours, the raven guiding Silas through the deserted streets of Blackwood, towards the outskirts of town. The air grew colder and heavier with each step, the silence broken only by the mournful whistle of the wind and the rhythmic clinking of the raven's metallic wings. As they reached the edge of town, Silas noticed a change in the landscape. The trees grew gnarled and twisted, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The ground was uneven and treacherous, littered with rocks and fallen branches. The raven landed on a nearby tree, its obsidian eyes fixed on a dark path leading into the woods. This is the path, it said. The ley lines converge deep within these woods. We must be careful. This place is steeped in darkness. Silas hesitated, his gaze fixed on the dark path. He could feel the evil emanating from the woods, a palpable presence that seemed to seep into his very bones. Are you sure about this? Silas asked, his voice trembling. This place feels wrong. We have no choice, the raven replied. The slumbering one is growing stronger with each passing moment. We must act quickly, before it's too late. Silas took a deep breath and stepped onto the path, his heart pounding in his chest. The woods were even darker and more oppressive than he had imagined. The trees formed a dense canopy overhead, blocking out the moonlight. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. As they walked deeper into the woods, Silas began to notice strange symbols carved into the trees. The symbols were similar to those in the book, but they seemed to writhe and shift before his eyes, as if they were alive. What are those? Silas asked, pointing to one of the symbols. Markers, the raven replied. The ancient ones used them to mark the ley lines, to channel their energy. They are also warnings. Warnings? Silas asked, his voice trembling. Warnings of what? Of the dangers that lie ahead, the raven replied. Of the guardians who protect the ley lines, of the creatures that dwell in the darkness. Silas felt a shiver crawl down his spine. He was surrounded by danger, walking through a haunted forest, with nothing but a book and a metallic raven to protect him. As they continued to walk, Silas began to hear strange noises in the distance. Whispers, rustling sounds, and the snapping of twigs. He couldn't tell what was making the noises, but he knew it wasn't anything good. What's that? Silas asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The woods are alive, the raven replied. They are watching us, testing us. We must be vigilant. Suddenly, a pair of glowing red eyes appeared in the darkness ahead. Silas froze, his blood running cold. He could see nothing else, just the two glowing eyes staring at him with malevolent intensity. What is it? Silas asked, his voice trembling. A guardian, the raven replied. A creature of the woods bound to protect the ley lines. We must be careful. It is powerful and dangerous. The glowing eyes began to move, slowly approaching Silas and the raven. Silas raised the candlestick, his hand shaking. He knew he was no match for whatever was lurking in the darkness, but he was determined to fight back, to protect himself and the raven. As the creature drew closer, Silas could begin to make out its form. It was a large, wolf-like creature, its fur matted and tangled, its teeth bared in a snarl. Its glowing red eyes burned with a primal fury. The creature lunged at Silas, its claws outstretched, its teeth snapping. Silas screamed and ducked, narrowly avoiding the creature's attack. He swung the candlestick, hitting the creature in the snout. The creature howled in pain and staggered backwards. Silas didn't hesitate. He turned and ran, following the raven as it flew through the trees. They ran for what seemed like an eternity, the creature hot on their heels. Silas could hear its heavy breathing, its snapping jaws, its furious howls. Finally, they reached a clearing in the woods. The raven landed on a large, ancient tree, its branches reaching towards the sky. "This is it," the raven said. "The nexus of the ley lines. We must perform the ritual here to re-establish the seal." Silas looked around the clearing, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel the energy emanating from the tree, a powerful force that seemed to vibrate through his very being. But he also knew that they were not alone. He could still hear the creature, its howls growing closer with each passing moment. "We don't have time," Silas said, his voice trembling. "It's coming. We have no choice," the raven replied. "We must begin the ritual now, or all is lost." Silas took a deep breath and opened the book, his fingers tracing the ancient script. He began to read the words aloud, his voice trembling at first, but growing stronger with each passing moment. As he read, the air began to shimmer, the energy in the clearing growing stronger. The trees began to sway, the ground began to tremble. The creature burst into the clearing, its glowing red eyes fixed on Silas. It lunged at him, its claws outstretched. But before it could reach him, the raven swooped down, its metallic beak striking the creature in the eyes. The creature howled in pain and staggered backwards, its glowing eyes extinguished. The raven continued to attack the creature, its metallic beak tearing at its flesh. The creature fought back, its claws slashing at the raven, but the raven was too quick, too agile. Silas continued to read the ritual, his voice growing louder and more confident. The energy in the clearing reached a crescendo, the air crackling with power. Suddenly, a beam of light shot from the tree, striking the center of the clearing. The ground began to glow, ancient symbols appearing in the dirt. The creature screamed and collapsed, its body dissolving into dust. The ley lines were re-established. The seal was restored. Silas stopped reading, his body trembling with exhaustion. He looked around the clearing, his heart filled with a sense of relief. They had done it. They had stopped the creature, re-established the seal, and saved Blackwood. But their victory was short-lived. As the dust settled, Silas noticed a new presence in the clearing. A dark, shadowy figure standing in the distance, watching them. Silas stared at the figure, his blood running cold. He could feel the evil radiating from it, a palpable presence that seemed to extinguish the light. The raven landed on Silas's shoulder, its metallic claws digging into his flesh. "It has come," the raven whispered, its voice filled with dread. "The source of the curse." The shadowy figure began to move, slowly approaching Silas and the raven. As it drew closer, Silas could begin to make out its form. It was a tall, gaunt figure, its face obscured by shadows, its eyes burning with an unholy light. The figure stopped in front of Silas, its gaze fixed on him. "You have interfered," it said, its voice a chilling whisper. "You have undone what was meant to be." Silas stared at the figure, his mind reeling. Who was this creature? And what did it want? "Who are you?" Silas demanded, his voice trembling. "What do you want?" The figure chuckled, a chilling sound that sent shivers down Silas's spine. "I am the one who created the curse," it said. "The one who has been waiting for centuries to reclaim what is rightfully mine." It stepped closer, its eyes burning with a dark intensity. "And now, Silas, it is time for you to pay the price." The figure extended a hand, its fingers long and skeletal, reaching toward Silas. "Join me, Silas," it rasped, its voice a hypnotic whisper. "Embrace the darkness, and together we will reshape Blackwood in our image." Silas recoiled, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel the power emanating from the figure, a corrupting influence that threatened to overwhelm him. He glanced at the raven perched on his shoulder, its obsidian eyes gleaming with warning. "I'll never join you," Silas spat, his voice filled with defiance. "I'll do everything in my power to stop you." The figure sighed, its shadowy form shifting slightly. "Such a pity," it said. "You have potential, Silas. You could have been a powerful ally. But alas, you have chosen the path of resistance." It raised its hand, and a wave of dark energy surged towards Silas, engulfing him in a suffocating embrace. Silas cried out, his body racked with pain. He felt the darkness seeping into his soul, corrupting his thoughts, twisting his desires. He fought against the darkness, clinging to the memory of his parents, to the hope of a better future for Blackwood. He focused his mind, drawing strength from the ancient symbols in the book, from the bond he shared with the raven. With a surge of willpower, he pushed back against the darkness, breaking free from its suffocating embrace. He stumbled backwards, gasping for air, his body trembling with exhaustion. The figure chuckled, its eyes burning with amusement. "Impressive," it said. "You have more resistance than I anticipated. But it will not be enough." It gestured towards the raven, its eyes filled with malice. "That creature is your weakness, Silas. It has given you power, but it has also made you vulnerable." The figure raised its hand again, and a bolt of dark energy shot towards the raven, striking it in midair. The raven cried out, its metallic wings faltering. It plummeted to the ground, landing with a sickening thud. Silas rushed to the raven's side, his heart filled with despair. He cradled the creature in his arms, its metallic feathers cooled and lifeless. "Raven," Silas cried, his voice filled with anguish. "What have you done?" The raven stirred weakly, its obsidian eyes flickering. "I am fading," it whispered. "The curse, it is too strong." "No," Silas cried. "You can't die. I need you." The raven looked at Silas, its eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and determination. "You must destroy the raven," it whispered. "Break the curse." Silas stared at the raven, his mind reeling. Destroy the raven? But the raven was his ally, his friend. How could he possibly destroy it? "I can't," Silas said, his voice filled with grief. "I can't do it." "You must," the raven insisted. "It is the only way." The raven's voice faded, its body growing colder in Silas's arms. Its obsidian eyes closed, and it fell silent. Silas stared at the raven, his heart shattered. He had lost his only friend, his only ally. He was alone again, facing a powerful and malevolent entity. He looked up at the figure, his eyes filled with hatred. "You'll pay for this," Silas spat. "I swear I'll make you pay." The figure chuckled, its shadowy form shifting slightly. "Brave words," it said. "But you are powerless, Silas. You cannot stop me. I am inevitable." It raised its hand, preparing to unleash another wave of dark energy. Silas knew he was outmatched, that he had no chance of defeating the figure. But he refused to give up. He would fight to the very end, even if it meant his own destruction. He stood up, his body trembling, his heart filled with a mixture of grief and determination. He looked down at the raven in his arms, his fingers tracing its cold, metallic feathers. He knew what he had to do. It was the only way to break the curse, to save Blackwood. With a heavy heart, he raised the raven above his head, his eyes fixed on the figure. "I'm sorry, old friend," he whispered, "but I have to do this." He closed his eyes and brought the raven crashing down onto the ground. The sound of metal shattering against stone echoed through the clearing. Silas opened his eyes, his heart filled with anguish. The raven lay in pieces at his feet, its metallic feathers scattered across the ground. As the raven shattered, a surge of energy erupted from its broken form, washing over Silas, engulfing him in a blinding light. He cried out, his body racked with pain. The figure screamed, its shadowy form flickering and distorting. "No!" it cried. "What have you done?" The light intensified, growing brighter and brighter, until it consumed the entire clearing. The figure vanished, its scream fading into the darkness. Then silence. Silas stood in the clearing, his body trembling, his mind reeling. The light had faded, leaving him alone in the darkness. He looked down at the shattered remains of the raven, his heart filled with grief. He had destroyed his only friend, his only ally. Had it worked? Was the curse broken? As he looked around, he noticed something strange. The clearing was changing. The trees were growing taller, their branches reaching towards the sky. The ground was becoming fertile, covered in lush green vegetation. The darkness was receding, replaced by a sense of peace and tranquility. Blackwood was healing. But then he felt it. A new presence, a new power, rising within him. He looked down at his hands, his fingers glowing with an ethereal light. He realized that he was not the same. The curse had been broken, but the raven's power had been transferred to him. He was now the guardian of the gate, the protector of Blackwood. But the raven's last words echoed in his mind. "There is something far worse." He looked towards the darkness, his heart filled with dread. He knew that his task was far from over. The slumbering one was still out there, waiting to be awakened. And now, it was his responsibility to stop it. But how could he possibly face such a powerful and ancient evil? He was just one man, armed with nothing but the remnants of a broken curse. As he stood there, lost in thought, he heard a voice. A soft, ethereal voice that seemed to come from within his own mind. "You are not alone." Silas gasped, his eyes widening in terror. Who was it? What was happening? The voice continued, growing stronger with each passing moment. "We are here to help you. We have been waiting for you." Silas felt a surge of hope, a flicker of light in the darkness. Who were these voices? And could he trust them? Then he saw them. Emerging from the shadows, drawn to the light within him, were figures. Not human, not demon, but something in between. They approached him, their eyes filled with ancient wisdom, their hands outstretched in friendship. They were the guardians of the ley lines, the protectors of Blackwood, and they were ready to help him face the darkness that lay ahead. But as he looked closer, he saw something else in their eyes, a hint of fear, a knowledge of what was coming that chilled him to the bone. What did they know that he didn't? What was so terrible that even these ancient guardians feared it? The adventure continues.